Really wasn't expecting. It wasn't that I went out to win a golf tournament because I had been struggling with my game for a few months really, and I was kind of in between what shaft I wanted to play. As a matter of fact, Wednesday of the Players Championship, I changed my shaft because the shaft that I had, I just couldn't control the ball.
Calvin Peete names 6 golfers he will never forgive. Before we dive into the bitter rivalries that defined one man's career, let's start with something incredible. Calvin Peete led the PGA Tour in driving accuracy for 10 straight years. 10 consecutive seasons of being the most precise driver in professional golf. That's not luck. That's not a fluke. That's dominance in its purest form. But here's what makes it hurt even more. Despite that decade of perfection, despite 12 tour wins, despite a Players' Championship and a Vardon Trophy, Peete never got the respect he earned. And there were 6 men who symbolized everything wrong with how the golf world treated him. 6 competitors who either attacked him directly, stole his recognition, or represented a system designed to keep him invisible. This is the story of why Calvin Peete could never forgive them. Let's start with 1984 because that's when things got ugly. Peete won the Vardon Trophy that year with a scoring average of 70.56. It should have been a crowning achievement. Instead, it turned into a war. Curtis Strange led the charge against him. Strange and his supporters accused Peete of manipulating the rules to protect his scoring average. They pointed to 2 specific moments. First, Peete withdrew from the Heritage Classic after shooting a 41 on the front 9. Critics said he quit to keep a bad score off his record. Second, he was disqualified from the Tournament of Champions for a scorecard error, which removed that round from his official statistics. Strange called it sitting on his average. He questioned Pete's integrity in front of the entire golf world. Think about what that means. Curtis Strange, the cocky Virginian who represented everything the country club establishment loved, publicly accused Calvin Peete of cheating the system. This wasn't some random player. This was one of the best American ball strikers of the decade, someone Peete traded places with on leaderboards all the time. Strange was abrasive, aggressive, and felt entitled to every accolade that came his way. When Peete beat him statistically, Strange couldn't accept it. Strange felt entitled to say that Peete, a man who learned golf at 23 with a permanently fused elbow who climbed out of Florida sugar mills to compete at the highest level, was lacking integrity. That accusation cut deep, but it got worse. The PGA Tour responded by creating a new rule. They called it the Cal Peete Rule, and everyone knew exactly who it targeted. The rule said that any player who teed off on the first hole must finish that round for it to count toward eligibility. Withdrawals or disqualifications midway through would disqualify you from statistical awards for the entire season. They literally rewrote the rulebook because a black golfer mastered their game. They codified Strange's whisper campaign into official policy, put an asterisk next to Pete's trophy, and told the world it was questionable. That was unforgivable. The PGA Tour chose to protect Curtis Strange and the establishment rather than defend their leading minority player. They proved that when a black man beat them at their own game, they would simply change the rules. The message was unmistakable. You can win, but we will make sure everyone questions how you did it. Now, before we go further, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me if you think the Cal Peete rule was racist. I want to know what you think about a rule literally named after one man to delegitimize his achievement. But Strange wasn't the only one Peete couldn't forgive. Let's rewind to 1982 because that season tells you everything about the invisible ceiling placed over Pete's career. 3 men won 4 PGA Tour events that year. Tom Watson, Craig Stadler, Calvin Peete, 4 wins each, identical statistical dominance. But when the awards were handed out, only one man swept the recognition. Watson won Player of the Year. Watson got the magazine covers. Watson got called the greatest of his generation. Meanwhile, Pete's 4 wins were treated like a nice surprise, a curiosity, a feel-good story that would fade by spring. Tom Watson represented everything Peete could never become. Watson was a Stanford graduate, the Golden Boy. He was the idealized image of American golf. Matching him win for win should have shattered that image. Instead, the golf world just ignored the comparison. Watson's victories at Pebble Beach were heroic. Pete's victories were mechanical. Watson missed fairways and got praised for his magical scrambling ability. Peete hit every fairway and got called robotic. The message was clear. Even when Petey did exactly what Watson did, it didn't count the same way. Watson was the ceiling, and Peete would never break through it no matter how many times he matched him statistically. That casual dismissal, that refusal to even consider Peete as an equal, something Peete could never forgive. Watson's chip-in at Pebble Beach to deny Nicklaus became the defining moment of that era. Nobody remembers that Peete won just as many tournaments. Nobody cared that Pete's season was equally dominant. The golf media decided Watson was the story, and Peete was just a footnote. The voting wasn't even close, which told Peete everything he needed to know about his place in golf's hierarchy. And then there's Craig Stadler. The Walrus? Stadler also won 4 times in 1982, including the Masters. Stadler's story reveals a different kind of injustice. Stadler could throw clubs. He could grimace and pout and lose his temper on national television. And the golf world loved him for it. They called it personality. They called it passion. They marketed him as the colorful character who made the game fun to watch. PT didn't have that luxury. He had to be perfect. He couldn't afford emotional outbursts because he was carrying the weight of representation for an entire race. He had to be the machine, flawless and stoic, because anything less would confirm every stereotype waiting to be weaponized against him. The establishment embraced Stadler's 4 wins as a triumph of personality. They gave Pete clinical respect but kept him at emotional distance. Stadler was loved. Pete was respected. And that gap, that difference in how the golf world invested emotionally in their success, highlighted a brutal double standard. White players could be flawed and celebrated for it. Black players had to be flawless, and even then, they were only tolerated. Stadler represented the freedom Pete would never have. And that was another wound that never healed. When Stadler won the Masters, the narrative was about this lovable underdog with a temper who conquered Augusta. When Pete contended in majors, the narrative was always about whether he could handle the pressure, whether he belonged in that elite company. Stadler got to be human. Pete had to be superhuman just to be accepted, but the complications didn't only come from white competitors. Lee Elder broke the color barrier at the Masters in 1975. He was the first black man to play Augusta as a competitor, not a caddy or a waiter. Achievement opened doors for Pete, but the relationship between the pioneer and the beneficiary was far more complex than history books admit. Elder reportedly resented younger black golfers like Pete and Jim Thorpe for achieving the financial success and tour stability he never had. The psychological toll of being first, of carrying that impossible burden, manifested as bitterness. Elder held grudges well into his later years, feeling that his sacrifices weren't properly venerated by those who walked through the doors he kicked open. This created a crabs-in-a-bucket dynamic. Instead of celebrating each other's success, there was friction. Pete often had to serve as Elder's defender against a hostile press, a burden that distracted from his own game. The defining moment came at the 1986 Masters. After shooting an 87 in the rain, Pete faced media questions about tradition and the black experience at Augusta. Frustrated by questions that white players never had to answer, Pete delivered a scorching response. He said that until Lee Elder, the only blacks at the Masters were caddies or waiters. To ask a black man what he feels about the traditions of the Masters, Pete said, is like asking him how he feels about his forefathers who were slaves. That quote reveals the impossible position Pete was in. He could never just be a golfer. He was always the designated spokesman for centuries of oppression. Elder's legacy, as monumental as it was, created expectations that crushed Pete's ability to focus purely on his game. He was fighting a war on 2 fronts, against the white establishment represented by Strange and Watson, and against the bitter expectations of the black pioneers who resented that his path was slightly easier than theirs. The friction with Elder wasn't about hatred, it was about the weight of a history neither of them asked for, but both had to carry. And Pete couldn't forgive the situation Elder left behind, even if he respected what Elder accomplished. He wanted to honor Elder's sacrifice, but he also needed to be his own man, to write his own story. That tension never resolved itself. Every time Pete stepped onto a course, he carried Elder's legacy, whether he wanted to or not. The burden of representation made it impossible for him to fail without it becoming a statement about his entire race. Then there's Jack Nicklaus, who occupies a strange space in this story. He wasn't openly antagonistic like Strange. He wasn't bitter like Elder. He was the benevolent emperor of golf, gracious and magnanimous. But that graciousness existed because the entire infrastructure of the sport was built in his image. Pete won the 1984 Vardon Trophy. The man he beat was Jack Nicklaus. And that's when the scrutiny intensified. The controversy over Pete's withdrawals and disqualifications must be understood in this context. Had Pete's average slipped, the trophy would have gone to Nicklaus, the game's greatest hero. The ferocity of the Cal-Pete rule debate was fueled by the feeling that Pete had stolen an accolade from Jack via a loophole. Nicklaus praised Pete publicly after the 1983 Ryder Cup, calling him a warm and caring man, but the social structure of that team told a different story. Pete was a utility player, valuable for his straight drives and foursomes, but never the star. The team was dominated by Watson, Crenshaw, and Stadler. Pete was useful but not central. The unforgivable aspect of the Nicklaus relationship was the asymmetry. Nicklaus could afford to be gracious because everything was already his. Pete, who beat Nicklaus statistically in '84 and matched his consistency for a decade, was always treated as a guest in Nicklaus's house. The fact that the tour changed its rules specifically to delegitimize a victory over Nicklaus proves who the system was designed to protect. He was never allowed to truly beat the Golden Bear, even when the numbers said he did. Nicklaus's kindness was genuine, but it came from a position of absolute power, which made it feel more like charity than respect. Finally, there's Larry Nelson, and this one cuts the deepest because Nelson is the mirror image that exposes everything. Like Pete, Nelson was a late starter who didn't pick up golf until his early 20s. Nelson learned after returning from Vietnam. Pete learned at 23 while working in the fields. Both were outsiders who defied conventional wisdom about when a professional golf career must begin. But the way their stories were told reveals the racial tax. Pete paid his entire career. Nelson was embraced as an American hero, the soldier who read Ben Hogan's book and went on to win majors. His narrative was rugged individualism, the American dream realized. Pete's narrative, which was objectively more miraculous given his fused elbow and extreme poverty, was framed as an anomaly, a curiosity, an exception that proved the rule. Nelson and Pete competed for the same accolades throughout the 80s. In 1979, Nelson was the Ryder Cup hero who dismantled the European team. Pete wasn't selected for that squad, despite playing well on tour. He had to wait until 83 to make his debut. The slight of being overlooked while Nelson was elevated to stardom lingered, but the ultimate unforgivable fact is the Hall of Fame. Larry Nelson is enshrined in the World Golf Hall of Fame. Calvin Peete, with 12 wins, a Players' Championship often called the fifth major, and a Vardon Trophy, is not. Nelson proved that a late starter could be accepted as a legend, which means Pete's exclusion wasn't about his late start. It was about who he was. Nelson is the proof that the door was open for people like Pete, but only if they were white. That's a betrayal Pete could never forgive. The comparison haunted Pete because it stripped away every excuse the golf establishment could offer for why he wasn't celebrated the same way. What makes all of this worse is how subtle the exclusion was. Nobody burned crosses on the fairway. Instead, they weaponized bureaucracy. They changed rules. They controlled narratives. Pete was described as having natural rhythm or being an overachiever. Those words sound like compliments, but they diminish intellectual capacity. Pete wasn't natural. He was a genius who figured out how to hit a golf ball straighter than anyone in history despite a permanently fused arm. Watson and Nicklaus were credited with course management and strategic brilliance. Pete was credited with rhythm, as if his success was accidental instead of engineered through relentless study and adaptation. The intellectual dismissal was constant. His precision was treated as a physical gift rather than a mental achievement. Nobody asked Pete about his strategic decisions or how he thought through a round. They just marveled at his swing like it was some kind of natural phenomenon beyond his control. The implication was always that he didn't understand his own success, that it just happened to him rather than being something he created through intelligence and discipline. The Vardon Trophy controversy crystallizes all of this. It wasn't enough that Pete won. The establishment needed to question how he won. They needed to imply he cheated. And when they couldn't prove that, they changed the law to make sure nobody could do it that way again. That's not competition. That's suppression. That's a system protecting itself from someone who wasn't supposed to succeed. Curtis Strange attacked his honor. Tom Watson monopolized recognition despite identical results. Craig Stadler got loved for being flawed while Petey had to be perfect. Lee Elder's legacy became a burden instead of a foundation. Jack Nicklaus's shadow made Pete's achievements feel smaller, even when they were equal. And Larry Nelson got everything Pete deserved simply because he fit the image the golf world wanted. When Pete died in 2015, he was eulogized as a pioneer, remembered fondly in highlight reels and History Month segments. But the specific injustices detailed here, the stolen legitimacy of his Vardon Trophy, the invisibility of his 82 season, the friction with Elder, the Hall of Fame snub compared to Nelson, paint a portrait of a man who was tolerated but never truly integrated. He stayed in the fairway for 10 straight years because he knew that in the rough, there was no mercy for someone like him. He couldn't afford mistakes. He couldn't afford controversy. He had to be perfect. And even perfection wasn't enough. His driving accuracy streak stands as a monument to precision under pressure, to excellence demanded but never fully rewarded. 10 years of never missing, and still they found ways to diminish what he accomplished. So yeah, Calvin Peete named 6 golfers he could never forgive. Not because he was bitter or petty, but because they represented a system that fought him every step of the way. They changed the rules when he mastered them. They stole his recognition when he earned it. They questioned his integrity when he proved himself. They wrote him out of history even as they praised his contributions. That's not something you forgive. That's something you carry to the grave. These 6 men weren't necessarily evil, but they benefited from a system designed to exclude Pete, and none of them fought hard enough to change it. If this story moved you, subscribe to this channel and leave a comment telling me which of these 6 betrayals was the worst. Was it Strange attacking his character, Watson stealing his moment, or the Hall of Fame refusing to recognize what he built? Let me know, because Calvin Peete's story deserves to be remembered exactly as it happened.
Tiger has been cleared to play, okay? A couple days ago. Do you think he'll be able to win another major?
Yeah, why not? Yeah, but I think he's good enough player. Well, it went okay for me. I mean, I wasn't in best of health, and I had a few issues, but I think everybody loved the golf course.
Vijay Singh is a Hall of Famer who reached world number 1 and won 3 major championships. He built one of golf's greatest careers through pure hard work. But here's what most people remember him for instead. 5 golfers he will never forgive. And it all started when the media called him a racist. What could drive a champion to hold grudges that lasted decades? What made Singh one of the most disliked players in golf history despite his incredible talent? The answer lies in 5 conflicts that defined his entire life in professional golf. These weren't just disagreements. They were battles that shaped how the world saw him and how he saw the world. Singh is an Indo-Fijian who became the first person of South Asian descent to win a major championship. He was inducted into the World Golf Hall of Fame in 2006. His record is staggering: 34 PGA Tour victories, 13 European Tour wins, 3 major titles. He was named PGA Tour Player of the Year in 2004. He won the tour's money list 3 times. He captured the FedEx Cup in 2008. Most remarkably, he achieved the world #1 ranking for 32 weeks. He did this by being the only golfer to consistently challenge and ultimately dethrone Tiger Woods during his absolute peak. But alongside that Hall of Fame career sits a darker reputation. Singh earned a spot as one of the 10 most disliked golfers of all time. His career has been described as grossly underappreciated. Why? Because of his notoriously difficult relationship with the golf media. People saw him as aloof, prickly, a loner, and these 5 conflicts are why. The first feud changed everything. It happened in May 2003. Annika Sorenstam was the undisputed top player on the LPGA Tour. She accepted an invitation to play in the Bank of America Colonial. She became the first woman since 1945 to compete on the PGA Tour. The event became a global media sensation. Singh was world #7 at the time, and he walked straight into the fire. In an interview with the Associated Press, Singh held nothing back. What is she going to prove by playing? It's ridiculous, he said. She's the best woman golfer in the world. And I want to emphasize, woman, we have our tour for men, and they have their tour. She's taking a spot from someone in the field. Then came the threats. If he were drawn with her, he would withdraw. And finally, the line that defined everything. I hope she misses the cut. Why? Because she doesn't belong out here. The backlash hit like a freight train. Singh tried to walk it back. He said his words came out the wrong way. He claimed he actually said something different, that if he missed the cut, he'd rather she miss the cut as well. He didn't want a woman to beat him, but the Associated Press destroyed that defense. They reviewed the reporter's notes. They confirmed the original version of Singh's remarks. He had lied. But here's where it gets important. Singh wasn't the only golfer who disagreed with Sorenstam. Playing. Other golfers criticized her participation too, but Singh's comments were the strongest, and he lacked any public relations polish. So he became the perfect villain. He became Vijay the villain, the scourge of talk shows across America. Then the media did something unforgivable. They made it about his race. Barker Davis of the Washington Times wrote that Singh's sexism comes by it naturally. He continued with this. His birth certificate might say Fiji, but Singh is Indian by heritage. Nothing against India or Hinduism, but it's certainly fair to say that culture hasn't been at the fore when it comes to gender equity. Davis concluded that Singh definitely was remembering his patriarchal roots when he made his comments about Sorenstam. Jan Saraceno of USA Today went even further. He framed the entire incident as a clash of cultures and social dogmas. He contrasted Sorenstam from the liberal, open society of Sweden with Singh, born in Fiji to Indian parents. Then Saraceno crossed a line that can never be uncrossed. I don't know how much Singh was influenced by his ancestry, he wrote, but this much I do know. The institutionalized subordination, exploitation, and brutalization of women remains ingrained in that society. To support this claim, he cited Indian government statistics on bride burning. Let that sink in. A golfer made a sexist comment, and the media response was to pull statistics about bride burning in India. Singh was singled out for special condemnation, while other golfers who criticized Sorenstam were ignored. His Indian heritage was used as a weapon. A simple sporting controversy became an indictment of his entire culture. This was the moment that created the monster. Singh learned that the media wasn't just his opponent, it was his enemy, and he would never forget. 2 years later came the next battle. This one was with a peer, the 2005 Masters. Singh was world #1. Phil Mickelson was world #3. This was the peak of the Big Four era, a time of constant friction between elite players. During the second round at Augusta National, Singh was playing in the group, directly behind Mickelson. On the 12th green, Singh filed a complaint with tournament officials. He said Mickelson's spikes were tearing up the greens. They were leaving scuff marks. Mickelson had switched from 6mm spikes to longer 8mm spikes before the tournament. A rules official approached Mickelson on the 13th fairway. They discussed the complaint. Mickelson's shoes were checked twice, and here's the key part. They were found to be perfectly within the rules. Will Nicholson, the chairman of the Masters Rules Committee, publicly dismissed Singh's complaint. If there were spike marks, they were created by a person or persons unknown. Singh's power play had failed. He tried to get inside Mickelson's head. Instead, the rules officials sided against him publicly, But it got worse. After a suspension in play, both players ended up in the exclusive champions locker room. Mickelson heard Singh still talking about the spikes, and Mickelson snapped. He furiously confronted Singh. Witnesses described it as a frank exchange of views, a heated discussion. Some reports said Mickelson called Singh a profanity. Tiger Woods' caddy at the time, Steve Williams, confirmed the heated conversation. He said plainly, "There's no love lost between those two, that's for sure." The next day brought a cruel twist. Singh and Mickelson were paired together for the final round. Their interactions were ice cold. They shook hands at the start and finish. They stood on opposite sides of the tee box. They never walked together. Mickelson tried to spin it for the press. "We had a great time. We laughed. We giggled." Nobody believed him. Singh stayed testy and silent. Another peer relationship destroyed, another grudge locked in forever. The third name on Singh's list is different: Tiger Woods. But this wasn't a hostile feud. It was a professional rivalry built on deep respect. From 2003 to 2005, Singh and Woods flip-flopped to the number 1 and number 2 rankings. Singh's 2004 season remains one of the greatest in golf history. He won 9 times. He captured the PGA Championship. He was named Player of the Year. On September 5, 2004, he officially dethroned Woods as the number 1 ranked golfer in the world. He was the only player to top Tiger on the money list during Woods' prime, and he did it 3 times. Tiger's caddy, Steve Williams, called it a great rivalry, a love-hate sort of thing. They both love each other, hate each other. They both have deep respect for each other's game. They always want to beat each other's brains out. Tiger himself acknowledged Singh as his biggest rival. Williams noted that there's no player that spends more time practicing than Vijay did. Singh beat the sport's greatest talent. Not by being more talented, he beat him by outworking him. So why does Tiger belong on this list? Because the rivalry put Singh under constant pressure. It forced him into a bubble of conflict. It shaped his worldview of being in constant battle with the establishment and the media that surrounded Tiger. The rivalry wasn't personal, but it fed into Singh's belief that he had to fight everyone and everything to get what he deserved. Tiger represents the relentless competitive pressure that made Singh's entire career feel like warfare. Fast forward to 2020. Singh was 57 years old. During the COVID-19 pandemic pause, he entered a Korn Ferry Tour event, the Korn Ferry Challenge at TPC Sawgrass. The Champions Tour wasn't resuming yet. Singh was eligible to play through his lifetime PGA Tour status. The decision ruffled some feathers among developmental tour players, but one player, 35-year-old Brady Schnell, launched a nuclear attack on Twitter. Schnell's tweets were brutal. "Hey Vijay Singh, you are a true piece of trash if you accept money playing in a Korn Ferry Tour event, and I'll say it right to your face. He's a complete turd for playing. Just wait another month and roll with your senior friends." Schnell's logic was simple. Singh had earned over $71 million in his career. He was being selfish by taking one spot. That spot and the money could help a young kid. The incident sparked a larger debate. Schnell eventually apologized for his disrespectful language, but he stood by his core argument. And here's the irony. Phil Mickelson, Singh's old enemy from the 2005 Masters, publicly defended Singh's right to play the event. But Singh had learned his lesson. In 2003, he tried to clarify his remarks to the media. The reporter's notes destroyed him. In 2005, he was testy with the media after the Mickelson confrontation. It got him nowhere. In 2020, his response to being called trash was pure silence. He did not respond to Schnell's comments. He simply dropped out of the event. He absorbed the attack, he stewed, and he removed himself. His fights were no longer in the press. They were in the courtroom, which brings us to the 5th and final entry, the most important one, the PGA Tour itself, and 5 unnamed golfers. In January 2013, Singh admitted in a Sports Illustrated article that he used deer antler spray. He claimed he didn't know the product contained IGF-1. That's a growth hormone on the PGA Tour's list of banned substances. The tour's response was swift. They suspended Singh for 90 days, but they didn't do their homework first. Only after issuing the suspension did the tour fully consult the World Anti-Doping Agency. WADA clarified something crucial. They no longer considered the spray a prohibited substance unless a positive test results. Singh had never tested positive. The tour was publicly embarrassed. They were forced to drop the disciplinary action and revoke the suspension. But for Singh, the damage was done. He had been labeled by the PGA Tour, the media, some fellow golfers and fans as someone who intentionally took a banned substance. Singh filed a lawsuit against the PGA Tour in the New York Supreme Court in May 2013. The claim was simple. The tour breached its covenant of good faith and fair dealing. They rushed to judgment. The legal battle was dirty. It lasted for over 5 years. It ended in November 2018, just before trial, with a settlement. The PGA Tour's public statement was total vindication for Singh. The PGA Tour recognizes that Vijay is one of the hardest working golfers ever to play the game, and does not believe that he intended to gain an unfair advantage over his fellow competitors in this matter. But here's the smoking gun. The real reason this feud tops the list. Singh's lawsuit wasn't just about his own mistreatment. It was about disparate treatment. His legal filings made a specific and explosive allegation. The PGA Tour subjected him to absurd treatment by ignoring the use of antler spray by at least 5 other professional golfers. While Singh was suspended and publicly shamed, at least 5 other golfers were never suspended. His lawsuit alleged the tour misled the public by characterizing Singh as a cheater who caught a break, when in fact, he was the only one punished while others who used the same product were protected. Think about what that means. 5 professional golfers used the exact same spray. The tour knew about it, but only Singh faced consequences. Only Singh was suspended. Only Singh was publicly humiliated. Only Singh had his reputation destroyed. The tour could have tested all of them. They could have suspended all of them. They could have treated everyone equally, but they didn't. They chose him. Why? Was it because he was already the villain? Was it because he was the outsider who'd never played their game? Was it because they knew he'd fight back and that would justify their actions? Singh spent 5 years and millions of dollars proving one thing. He was right. This is the unifying theory of Vijay Singh's entire career. In 2003, he was singled out for special condemnation for his patriarchal roots, while other golfers who criticized Sorenstam were ignored by commentators. In 2005, he was singled out for a heated locker room confrontation over legal spikes. In 2020, he was singled out for vicious public shaming for illegal tournament entry. In 2013, he was literally and legally singled out for suspension, while at least 5 others who did the same thing were ignored. The 5 unnamed golfers are the symbol of his entire career. They represent a system that consistently applied a different, harsher set of rules to him, the aloof Indo-Fijian outsider, than it did to the golf establishment. This is why he will never forgive. The 2013 lawsuit wasn't about deer antler spray. It was a 5-year, multi-million-dollar war against 20 years of perceived slights. Starting with the racism angle in 2003, he believed, and in the case of the lawsuit proved, that the actions against him weren't isolated mistakes. They were part of a persistent, unfair pattern of targeting. Vijay Singh's legacy remains split. The grossly underappreciated Hall of Fame athlete on one side, the disliked villain on the other. He is a complex and vulnerable man. His career can't be understood by looking at his wins alone. It must be understood through his conflicts. These 5 feuds aren't separate stories. They're chapters in one continuous narrative that defined his life in professional golf. The 2003 racism angle was the inciting incident. It established him as a cultural outsider. It taught him the media was an opponent he couldn't beat with facts or clarifications. The peer conflicts with Mickelson and Schnell reinforced his loner status. They hardened his prickly exterior into a defensive shell. The rivalry with Tiger Woods was his sole refuge, the one arena where rules were clear, where respect was mutual, where his relentless work was all that mattered. The 2013 lawsuit, built on the existence of the 5 unnamed golfers, was his ultimate battle against the singling out he'd endured his entire career. Singh's unforgiving nature isn't a personality flaw. It's a defense mechanism forged over 30 years. He learned in 2003 that he couldn't win fights in the press. He could only win them in 2 arenas where he could force a fair outcome: on the leaderboard against Tiger Woods, and in the New York Supreme Court against the PGA Tour. The Tour's 2018 settlement and its public admission that he did not intend to gain an unfair advantage wasn't just a resolution. It was his ultimate vindication, proof that his paranoia wasn't paranoia at all. It was pattern recognition. These are the 5 golfers Vijay Singh will never forgive. Annika Sorenstam and the media who used his heritage against him. Phil Mickelson, who confronted him over legal equipment. Tiger Woods, who represented the relentless pressure that defined his prime. Brady Schnell, who called him trash for exercising his legal rights. And the 5 unnamed golfers who did exactly what he did but faced no consequences while he was publicly destroyed. Each represents a different wound. Together they explain why one of golf's greatest champions became one of its most disliked figures. Which of these 5 feuds do you think was the most justified? Was Singh right to hold these grudges, or did he bring it on himself? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more stories about golf's most controversial figures, hit that subscribe button. We're just getting started.
Thank you for inducting me and passing me in here. Jay, thank you for moving the age down from 50 to...
Tommy Bolt would have been awesome. That would have been awesome, right? Augusta is notoriously known for adjusting things from west to east.
6 players, 6 betrayals, one man who never forgot. Tiger Woods didn't just face opponents on the golf course. He faced something far worse: racism, betrayal, public humiliation, and some of these wounds cut so deep that forgiveness was never an option. Today we're diving into the 6 golfers Tiger Woods could never forgive, and trust me, some of these stories will shock you to your core. When Tiger Woods stepped onto Augusta National in 1997, he didn't just win the Masters. He shattered records, demolished expectations, and became the first black man to win a major championship. He was 21 years old, the world was at his feet, and then Fuzzy Zoeller opened his mouth. Zoeller, a former Masters champion himself, was asked about the young champion on camera. What he said next revealed the ugly truth about golf's old guard. Referring to Tiger as that little boy, Zoeller suggested Tiger shouldn't serve fried chicken or collard greens at the next year's champions dinner. Let that sink in. Tiger had just achieved the impossible, and instead of respect, he got a racist stereotype thrown in his face. This wasn't some random fan. This was a respected professional golfer, someone who should have known better. But here's the really disturbing part. The media didn't even report it immediately. ESPN was there, CNN was there, they all heard it, and they stayed silent. When the story finally broke, Zoeller tried to laugh it off. He claimed he was just a jokester making a harmless reference to the champions dinner. His agent spun it as a misunderstanding, but there was no misunderstanding. It was a calculated racist attack on Tiger's historic moment. And Tiger? He was trapped. At 21 years old, newly famous, with millions in endorsement deals on the line, he couldn't fight back. He had to smile and accept the apology. His statement called Zoeller's comments out of bounds and disappointing, but then came the corporate script. We all make mistakes, and it is time to move on. I accept Fuzzy's apology. That wasn't forgiveness, that was survival. Tiger knew that if he rejected the apology, if he called Zoeller what he really was, the golf world would paint him as the angry black man. So he swallowed the humiliation and moved forward. But make no mistake, that wound never healed. Before we continue with the rest of these shocking betrayals, if you're enjoying this deep dive into Tiger's most painful feuds, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling us which betrayal you think hurt Tiger the most. We're just getting started, and what's coming next is even more intense. Fast forward 16 years, Tiger Woods is no longer that 21-year-old kid. He's a 14-time major champion. He's the king of golf. And then Sergio Garcia decides to reopen the exact same wound. It's 2013, and Tiger and Sergio are already feuding after a heated incident at the Players' Championship. The tension is public, and it's personal. Then, at a European Tour Awards dinner, someone jokingly asks Sergio if he'd invite Tiger over for dinner during the upcoming US Open to make peace. Sergio's response? We'll have him round every night. We will serve fried chicken. The room went silent. The same racist slur, the same ugly stereotype. 16 years later, and golf still hadn't changed, but Tiger had. This time there was no corporate statement from an agent. Tiger took to his own Twitter account and delivered his verdict. The comment that was made wasn't silly. It was wrong, hurtful, and clearly inappropriate. Notice the language. He didn't accept anything. He defined what happened on his terms. He called it wrong. He called it hurtful, and then he dismissed it. It is long past time to move on. That's not forgiveness. That's a king declaring the matter beneath him. Sergio scrambled to apologize, claiming he didn't mean it as racist. But the damage was done, and here's the proof that this wound remains open. In recent years, Sergio joined LIV Golf, the controversial Saudi-backed league. When Tiger criticized LIV and its CEO Greg Norman, Sergio fired back publicly, defending Norman and attacking Tiger's leadership. The feud is still alive. The bitterness is still there. Because when you racially attack Tiger Woods twice in one lifetime, you don't get to come back from that. But racism from rivals is one kind of pain. Betrayal from your inner circle, that's something else entirely. Tiger Woods is famously private. He's been described as an obsessive control freak who demands absolute loyalty from everyone in his world. And for 6 years, Hank Haney was inside that world. Haney was Tiger's swing coach from 2004 to 2010. During that time, Tiger won 6 major championships. Haney had access to everything. He saw Tiger at his most vulnerable, his most focused, his most human. And then in 2012, 2 years after they split, Haney published a tell-all book called The Big Miss My Years Coaching Tiger Woods. This wasn't a technical golf manual. This was a commercial betrayal designed to make money off Tiger's name and privacy. Haney filled the book with personal, unflattering details. He painted Tiger as cheap, rude, and self-centered. He detailed Tiger's bizarre obsession with the Navy SEALs, describing intense military training sessions, and even a moment where Tiger demonstrated a chokehold on Haney, saying, "From here I could kill you in about 2 seconds." These were private moments. These were things shared in confidence, and Haney sold them for a bestseller. Tiger's response was ice cold. "I think it's unprofessional and very disappointing, especially because it's someone I worked with and trusted as a friend." He continued, "I just think this book is very self-serving." That phrase, self-serving, is the key. Haney tried to defend himself, claiming he was just a witness to greatness, writing an honest book. But his own final chapter betrayed his real motive. He spent pages comparing his coaching stats to Tiger's previous coach, Butch Harmon, desperately trying to prove he was better. It was pathetic, it was transparent, and it was unforgivable. Tiger paid Haney for two things: his expertise and his silence. Haney broke that code. He monetized the sanctum. And in Tiger's world of zero-tolerance loyalty, that's a permanent exile. But if Hank Haney's betrayal was a knife in the back, what Steve Williams did was something far worse. For 12 years, Steve Williams was more than Tiger's caddy. He was his enforcer, his confidant, his best friend on tour. He carried the bag for 13 of Tiger's 15 major championships, and then Tiger fired him in 2011. Williams was bitter. He felt betrayed. He'd stuck by Tiger through the 2009 scandal when the whole world turned against him. He'd been loyal during what he called incredibly difficult times, and now he was out. In interviews back in New Zealand, Williams let his anger show. Realistically, I could look back, and I've wasted the last 2 years of my life because he's played infrequently. He's been injured and played poorly, Williams said publicly. I lost a tremendous amount of respect for him. Whatever respect he may have earned back, he's just lost. But that was just Act 1. 4 months later, Williams was at a Caddy Awards dinner in Shanghai. He was being honored for his celebration after Adam Scott won the Bridgestone Invitational, which Williams had called the greatest victory of my career. That statement was absurd given his 13 majors with Tiger, and when asked about it on stage, Williams let his true feelings explode. I wanted to shove it up that black arsehole. The room froze. This wasn't a rival making a tasteless joke. This was Tiger's closest professional partner for over a decade, fusing personal hatred with an explicit racial slur. It was the most vicious personal attack Tiger had ever faced, and what made it even more painful was what came next. The golf establishment immediately defended Williams. Greg Norman rushed to say, "Steve's not a racist, not at all." The old guard circled the wagons, and then Tiger shocked everyone. He issued a statement defending Williams. "Steve Williams is certainly not racist," Tiger said. Wait, what? Why would Tiger defend the man who just called him that? Because Tiger is a master strategist. By refusing to call it racist, Tiger took away its power. He refused to become the victim of another global media circus about racism in golf. He'd carried that burden his entire career. This time, he reframed it. It wasn't a powerful bigot attacking a black man. It was a bitter, fired employee having a pathetic meltdown. Tiger refused to let Williams' hatred define him. He took control of the narrative and left Williams looking small, spiteful, and desperate. In recent years, Williams has appeared on podcasts trying to rehabilitate his image, fondly recalling how Tiger used to thank him after every round. But that's just an old man trying to clean up his legacy. Because despite a Hall of Fame career, Steve Williams will forever be remembered for that one unforgivable moment. And Tiger hasn't forgotten. Now, the racism and personal betrayals were wounds that cut Tiger's soul, but there was another kind of attack he faced, a direct assault on his integrity. And in golf, that's sacred ground. Enter Brandel Chamblee. Chamblee was a former PGA Tour player turned Golf Channel analyst. He was known for being critical, insightful, and willing to say what others wouldn't. In 2013, Tiger had one of the best seasons of his career. He won 5 times. He reclaimed the world #1 ranking. It was a statement year. And then Chamblee published his year-end grades in golf.com. For Tiger, Chamblee wrote 100 with a line through it, followed by an F. The reason? Tiger was a little cavalier with the rules. That alone was serious. But Chamblee didn't stop there. He prefaced the grade with a personal story about cheating on a 4th grade math test and getting an F from his teacher. The message was crystal clear. Tiger Woods is a cheater. In golf, where players call penalties on themselves, where honor and integrity are everything, this was nuclear. This was calling Tiger's entire legacy into question, and Tiger responded with overwhelming force. His agent Mark Steinberg immediately threatened legal action, but the target wasn't Chamblee. It was Golf Channel and its parent company, NBC Universal. Tiger had immense power and a lucrative business relationship with the network. As Tiger himself said, the ball really is in the court of the Golf Channel. The network caved completely. Chamblee was forced to issue a groveling public apology on Twitter. Golf is a gentleman's game, and I'm not proud of this debate. I want to apologize to Tiger for this incited discourse. He later admitted that comparing that to cheating in grade school went too far. Shortly after, Chamblee gave up his writing positions at Golf Magazine and Golf.com. Tiger didn't just win the argument, he ended it. He demonstrated that attacking his integrity was a line that couldn't be crossed, and anyone who tried would face the full weight of his influence. Throughout his career, Tiger also faced criticism from golf's old guard. Players like Tom Watson, an 8-time major champion, repeatedly reprimanded Tiger for his on-course behavior. Watson criticized Tiger's language and club throwing, calling it beneath the sport's standards. In 2010, Watson stated, "I feel that he has not carried the same stature that other great players have come along like Jack Nicklaus, Arnold Palmer, Byron Nelson, the Hogans, in the sense that there was language and club throwing on the golf course. This wasn't personal hatred. It was cultural judgment." Watson and his generation represented a stoic, emotionally reserved ethos. Tiger's fiery, fist-pumping style, his raw emotion, his occasional profanity, it was seen as disrespectful to the game's traditions. This detached disdain from the sport's legends was another layer of opposition Tiger faced. He was too loud, too emotional, too different for the old guard's comfort. But Tiger never apologized for being himself. He played with passion, and that passion made him the greatest player of his generation. Now here here's where the story gets really interesting, because there's one major rival who proves that Tiger can forgive. His name is Phil Mickelson. For nearly 20 years, Tiger and Phil hated each other. They were the two dominant American players of their era, and their rivalry was ice cold. Mickelson would take public shots at Tiger, mocking his driving distance and calling his equipment inferior. In 2003, Mickelson told a magazine that Woods hates that I can fly it past him now. Tension reached its peak at the 2004 Ryder Cup when Captain Hal Sutton paired them together. They were reportedly not on speaking terms, and their lack of chemistry showed as they lost both matches. For years, the feud simmered, but then something changed in 2016. At the Ryder Cup that year, Tiger was injured and serving as a vice captain. Mickelson was playing. For the first time, they had to work together toward a common goal. Mickelson later explained, "Our relationship turned around 2016. We ended up spending a lot of time on the phone. It brought us closer." The golf world was shocked. In 2018, they played a practice round together at the Masters, their first in 20 years. Mickelson, who once openly mocked Tiger, now texted him during his comeback saying, "I found myself pulling so hard for him. It was unusual." So why did Tiger forgive Phil after 2 decades of bitter rivalry but not the others? The answer is simple. Mickelson's attacks were always professional. He attacked Tiger's golf game. He questioned his driving. He criticized his equipment. He challenged his dominance, but he never attacked Tiger's race. He never betrayed Tiger's privacy. He never questioned Tiger's integrity or character. The Mickelson rivalry, while cold and tense, was always in bounds. It was about trophies and rankings and bragging rights. It was golf, and that's why it could be repaired. Mickelson proved the boundary exists, and Zoller, Garcia, Haney, Williams, and Chambly all crossed it. Tiger Woods' career is defined by 2 kinds of conflict. There were the professional slights that fueled him, the Stephen Ames trash talk that led to a brutal 9 and 8 beatdown, the Vijay Singh caddy wearing a Tiger hoop and hat before getting crushed. Those were calluses. They made him stronger. But the 6 men we've discussed today, they didn't create calluses. They created scars. Fuzzy Zoeller and Sergio Garcia deployed the same racist stereotypes 16 years apart, proving that golf's bigotry never went away. It just got quieter. Hank Haney monetized Tiger's privacy and betrayed the inner circle for a bestseller. Brandel Chambly attacked Tiger's integrity in the one sport where integrity is everything. Steve Williams combined personal and racial hatred into one explosive, unforgivable moment. And through it all, Tiger endured. He absorbed blows that would have destroyed lesser men. He navigated a career unlike any other, facing racism, betrayal, and public attacks while still becoming the greatest golfer of his generation. The remarkable thing isn't that these wounds exist. It's that Tiger survived them. He outlasted every single one of his enemies. Today, Zoller is a forgotten relic. Garcia's legacy is tainted by his own words. Haney is known more for his betrayal than his coaching. Williams is defined by his racist outburst. Chambly was humiliated into silence. And Tiger? He's still the face of golf. He's still the standard. He's still the legend. Which of these betrayals do you think hurt Tiger the most? Was it the racist attacks that targeted his identity, the personal betrayals from his inner circle, or the public challenges to his integrity? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the untold stories of sport's greatest legends. Because Tiger Woods' story isn't just about golf. It's about resilience, power, and the price of greatness.
On the tour, Charlie was sometimes banned from clubhouse restaurants. Folks threatened him, shouted slurs from the gallery, kicked his ball into the rough.
Charlie Sifford has died. He was often called the Jackie Robinson of golf. He was the first black player on the PGA Tour. And
Charlie was the grandfather I never had. You know, to me, he was Grandpa Charlie.
When people hear he was racist, they think of one golfer who treated Charlie Sifford badly. But the real story is far bigger and more shocking. Sifford didn't just fight one racist golfer. He fought an entire system built to keep him out. And the 5 forces he could never forgive weren't individual rivals. They were something much worse. They were the people and institutions that stole his entire career. But here's the twist. Sifford's story doesn't end in defeat. It ends in triumph. And that makes his battle even more powerful. Charlie Sifford wanted to play golf. That's it. He just wanted to compete. But from 1934 to 1961, the PGA had a rule that made that impossible. It was called the Caucasian-only clause. This wasn't some hidden policy. It was written right into the official rules. If you weren't white, you couldn't join the PGA. And if you couldn't join the PGA, you couldn't compete for real money or championships. Sifford turned professional in 1948. He proved his talent by winning the United Golf Association's National Negro Open 6 times in a row from 1952 to 1956. But none of that mattered. The PGA said he couldn't play, not because he wasn't good enough, but because of his skin color. This clause didn't just block Sifford. It blocked every black golfer who tried to compete. Men like Bill Spiller and Ted Rhodes had fought this rule before Sifford. They lost. The PGA refused to change. For nearly 3 decades, they kept the clause in place. While Jackie Robinson broke baseball's color barrier in 1947, golf stayed segregated for another 14 years. Sifford was 38 years old when he finally got approval to play in 1960. He didn't get full full PGA membership until 1964. By then, he was 42. His prime years were gone. His late 20s and 30s, when athletes are at their peak, were stolen from him. He could have won major championships. He could have earned millions. Instead, he was forced to watch from the sidelines, all because of one racist rule. The PGA's Caucasian-only clause is the first unforgivable force. It represents institutional racism at its worst. This wasn't just one person being mean. This was an entire organization deciding that black people didn't belong in golf, and they defended that decision for decades. But the clause needed people to enforce it. PGA presidents and leaders became the face of this discrimination. Horton Smith served as PGA president twice, from 1952 to 1954, and again from 1957 to 1958. During his leadership, Sifford was trying desperately to get on the tour. Smith and others like him represented the institutional defense of segregation. They could have changed the rule. They chose not to. When California's Attorney General Stanley Mosk threatened to ban the PGA from California unless they dropped the racist clause, the PGA leadership didn't back down. Instead, they moved the 1962 PGA Championship from Los Angeles to Pennsylvania. Think about that. They spent huge amounts of money to relocate an entire championship just to avoid integration. This wasn't passive racism. This was active, calculated resistance. Before we go further, I want to ask you something. If this story is shocking you, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below. Tell me what you think about how golf treated its black pioneers. Your engagement helps us share these important stories with more people. Tournament sponsors and officials created their own roadblocks too. Even when Sifford started getting invitations, they found ways to block him. The Texas Open was suddenly renamed the Texas Open Invitational. Why? Because calling it an invitational gave sponsors the power to decide who could play, and they decided Sifford couldn't. At the Houston Classic, a sponsor representative personally barred him from competing. A PGA official could only say, "Sorry, Charlie." That official knew it was wrong, but he didn't stop it. In one incident, Sifford hit a hole-in-one. The prize was supposed to be $100,000 in a new car, but the prize was mysteriously rescinded. Sifford had to hire lawyers just to get what he'd earned. These sponsors and officials are the second unforgivable force. They used administrative tricks and legal loopholes to deny Sifford his rights. The third unforgivable force was even more disturbing. These were the anonymous saboteurs who attacked Sifford physically. At the 1952 Phoenix Open, Sifford and Joe Louis arrived at the first tee to find human excrement placed inside the hole. Someone had done this deliberately to humiliate them. Sifford received death threats over the phone. He found black cats placed in his bed during tournaments. Competitors kicked his golf ball from the fairway into the rough to ruin his shots. These weren't accidents. These were calculated acts of hatred designed to destroy his focus and his career. The fourth unforgivable force was the hostile spectators. At the 1961 Greater Greensboro Open, Sifford faced what he called a war zone. A wolf pack of young white men followed him around the course. They screamed racial slurs. They told him to go back to the cotton fields. They threatened him during his backswing. One spectator picked up Sifford's ball and threw it away from the fairway. Police didn't arrive until the 14th hole. By then, Sifford had endured hours of terror. He admitted he couldn't shake the fear. He knew what happened to black men in the Jim Crow South. Despite all this, Sifford shot a 72 that day. He later called it one of the greatest rounds of his life, not because of the score, but because he survived. Even when Sifford was allowed to compete, he faced social exclusion. The fifth unforgivable force was the system of segregation within the clubhouses themselves. Sifford was banned from using clubhouse restaurants. He had to eat his meals on a bench near his locker. He sat surrounded by the smell of sweaty shoes and damp towels while white golfers dined comfortably inside. This wasn't just about food. It was about sending a message. The message was clear. You can play, but you don't belong here. Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist Jim Murray wrote that Sifford had to birdie, not talk, his way through social prejudice. His weapon was his 9-iron, not a microphone. Sifford's courage came from his ability to break barriers by breaking par. He focused on his game because he had no other choice. He couldn't change minds with words. He had to change them with victories. People often ask if Sifford had specific golfer rivals who treated him badly. The answer is complicated. Sifford faced competitors like Don January, Steve Opperman, and Harold Henning. These men were rivals, but they weren't sources of racism. They competed fairly. In 1969, Sifford won the Los Angeles Open by defeating Henning in a playoff. Henning was from South Africa, a country built on apartheid. The victory was symbolic. It represented American integration triumphing over international segregation. But Henning himself wasn't an enemy. He was just a competitor who happened to lose that day. So if Sifford didn't have 5 specific golfers he couldn't forgive, who were the real villains? The answer is clear. The 5 unforgivable forces were the PGA's racist policy, the leadership figures who defended segregation, the tournament sponsors and officials who blocked him, the violent and racist spectators, and the anonymous saboteurs who attacked him physically. These weren't individuals. They were systems. They were groups. They were the collective racism of an entire sport. But Sifford didn't fight alone. He had powerful allies. Stanley Mosk, Mosk, California's attorney general, became his champion. Mosk met Sifford in 1959 and dedicated himself to the cause. He told the PGA that if they didn't remove the Caucasian-only clause, they couldn't hold tournaments in California. This economic pressure, combined with opposition from the NAACP and Joe Louis, finally forced the PGA to act. In November 1961, they removed the clause, but it wasn't because they suddenly believed in equality. It was because they had no choice. Joe Louis himself played a crucial role. The former heavyweight boxing champion was passionate about golf. He used his fame to get Sifford invitations and visibility. He even gave Sifford a putter that Sifford used to win the 1957 Long Beach Open. Sifford also drew inspiration from Jackie Robinson. Robinson had faced similar hatred in baseball. He showed Sifford that it was possible to endure and prevail. By the time Sifford got full PGA membership in 1964, he was 42 years old. Most athletes would have given up, but Sifford kept fighting. He won 2 official PGA Tour titles in 1967 and 1969. He won a major championship on the Senior Tour in 1975. These victories prove what he could have accomplished if he'd been given a fair chance from the start. In 2014, President Obama awarded Sifford the Presidential Medal of Freedom. It was recognition for a man who had changed golf forever. Sifford once said he just wanted to play golf. That simple desire shouldn't have required decades of courage, but it did. And Sifford paid the price so that future generations wouldn't have to. Today, golfers like Tiger Woods compete without facing the institutional racism Sifford endured. That's Sifford's legacy. He didn't just integrate golf, he dismantled a system designed to keep black athletes out. The 5 forces he fought weren't 5 people. They were 5 arms of a massive racist machine, and he defeated them all. So here's my final question for you. Knowing what Sifford went through, how do you feel about golf's transformation? Do you think the sport has done enough to honor his legacy? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this story powerful, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Charlie Sifford's story isn't just about golf. It's about courage, resilience, and the fight for justice. And that's a story we should never forget.